Welcome back, wonderful 7th graders. Going to talk today about 3 different things. They are, as you can see, probability, outcomes, and sample spaces. 3 terms for you to get to know today. Please make this the title on the next free page on your math notebook. After you've made that title, please mark your page with your pencil, close your notebook entirely, put it out of the way, clear your space, and just give me your total concentration for a while, and I'll let you know when it's time to write. Talked yesterday about likelihood. I want to remind you how a likelihood works, just as a quick review. Likelihood we talked about in 5 possible ways. We talked about things being either impossible, unlikely, equally likely as not, likely, and certain yesterday. A couple examples. Let's say we're going to draw a card at random out of a deck of cards. We're just going to take the top card off. Let's talk about some likelihood things here. Let's start maybe here. What's the likelihood that I draw an ace? Where would I put that? Well, if you didn't know, there's 52 cards in a deck. There are 13 hearts, 13 diamonds. Those are both red. And then there's also 13 clubs and 13 spades. Those are both black, so I changed the color. And then each one has, like in each type of card, they have an ace, then they have a 2 through a 10, then they have a jack, a queen, and a king, if you haven't used cards very often. So the probability of an ace, the likelihood of an ace, there's an ace of each of these types. So there's 4 aces out of 52 total cards. Not super likely that you're going to draw an ace. It's possible, but only 4 out of the 52 possibilities have an ace. What about drawing a red? If you look here, 13 and 13, that's 26, which is half the cards are red, half the cards are black. Exactly either way. All the hearts and all the diamonds are red. So that one is equally likely as not. You're either going to draw a red or you're going to draw a black, and those are equally likely. How about drawing a yellow? Well, nothing's yellow. The spades and the clubs are black. The hearts and the diamonds are red. Nothing's yellow, so that's impossible. There's no chance whatsoever that that's going to happen. What about draw a face card? So as I wrote up here, there are 3 face cards here. There's 3 face cards here. There's 3 face cards here. And there's 3 face cards here, the jack, the queen, and the king. So altogether, that would be 12 face cards. That's a lot, but it's not half. Half's 26 of the cards. So it's still not too bad, 12 out of 52, but it's still unlikely. There's still certainly less than half the chance that you're going to draw a face card. And last but not least, not draw a heart. So remember, there are 4 types of cards in the deck. There are clubs, spades, diamonds, and hearts. So it looks like there, 13, 13, 13, that's 39 out of the 52 cards are not hearts. So that's actually pretty likely. It's not certain. You definitely could draw a heart, but I'd say it's likely. So today, let's do this first. Which game would you choose? I want you to pause here, and I want you to imagine you have the choice to play these 2 games. And I want you to decide which one you think would be easier to win. In game number 1, you flip a coin and you win if it lands on heads. And in game number 2, you roll a die, a number cube, and you win if it shows a number that is divisible by 3. Pause now, think, decide which game you think you'd be more likely to win and why. And then unpause when you're ready to go. Okay, we'll come back to these. Today I want to teach you how to explain 3 things related to this games you just played and the things I've been showing you. I want to talk about how to explain probability, outcomes, and sample spaces. So let's start with I do. So let's start with your first game you just thought about. Game number 1, you flip a coin and you win if it lands showing heads. Okay. So let's talk about these words in that. Outcomes are the possible things that could happen. We'll just call them possibilities right now. So in this case, there's not very many, right? Heads is, we would say, an outcome. And tails is an outcome. And that's the only possible outcomes. That's what that word means. It's just like a thing that could happen. So in this case, there are two possible outcomes. I'll even put two and kind of write what they are, right? So when I talk about the word outcomes, that's what I mean. What are the things that could happen? The sample space is sort of like all the outcomes together. So they're very similar. This is like each possibility, and this is all the possibilities together. So here, it's going to look almost like the same answer, but we use them differently. Heads or tails is the sample space. That's all the possibilities. Each one of those, 1 and 2, separately, we would call an outcome. So now let's talk probability. What's the probability that you win this game? So we write it like this. We would say the probability, we put a P, that you flip a heads. So the probability of anything, we write like this. We determine its probability, how probable, how likely is it to happen, by saying the number of favorable outcomes, that means the possible of good outcomes or outcomes where you would win, out of all the possible outcomes, right? So in this case, all the outcomes, there are two. There are heads or tails. There's only two possibilities. And in this case, the number of favorable outcomes, the number where you would win the game, is one favorable outcome out of the two outcomes. We would say the probability that you get a heads is 1 out of 2. And that's it. That's how we express probability. It looks like a fraction. You have a half of a chance of winning this, a 50-50 chance of winning this game. Half the times you'll win, half the times you'll lose, probably, if you play enough times. That's called its probability. So in this case, the probability you would win is about 1/2. Let me do game number 2. So in this one, you win if it is a number divisible by 3. So let's review these words again and get those under control. So first of all, I can start with sample space. Remember, the sample space is all the possibilities, all the possible outcomes. So in this case, you can roll any number between 1 and 6 on the die. So I'll just say 1 through 6 in this case. That's your sample space. That's all the things that could happen. Individual possibilities here, getting a 1 is an outcome, a single outcome. 2 is an outcome. So is 3. So is 4. So is 5. So is 6. So outcomes are individual. They're each thing. Sample space is all the possible outcomes together. They're similar, but they're related. So let's talk about your probability that you win this game. Probability of win, let's say here. So any probability is the number of favorable or good or winning outcomes out of all possible outcomes. I usually start with that bottom one. It's usually easier to figure out. So in this case, I know there's 6 possible outcomes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 things I could get. So the question now becomes, how many of those are favorable? How many of those numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, do I win the game? So in this case, 3 is favorable, because 3 is divisible by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 6 is also a favorable outcome, because 6 divided by 3 is 2. Anything else, 1, 2, 4, or 5, if I divide it by 6, I'm not going to get a whole number. I'm going to get a fraction or a decimal, so it's not divisible by 3. So in this case, there are 6 possible outcomes, and 2 of them win me the game. So I have a 2 out of 6 chance of winning this game if I roll the die. That's a fraction. You can also reduce it to a 1 out of 3 chance. Those are both fine. So in this case, this game's a little bit less likely than the last one. The last one you had a 1 in 2. This one you have a 1 in 3 chance of win, so the other game is more likely to win. So I would probably pick that one. All right, open your notebook. Let's do one together. So let's just say you were going to draw a card out of this bag without looking. Go ahead and pause, write this down. Remember, on We Do, your options are you can pause, you can try to work it out on your own, then play the video and see how you did. You can also work it as I work it, or you can just wait till I'm done, write it down, and just listen through and make sure you get a good handle on it. So I'm going to draw a card randomly out of this bag. What's the probability of drawing a blue moon? So first, let's talk about the outcomes. So the outcomes are blue moon and yellow star. Those are the two possible outcomes that I can draw, right? The sample space is there are 5 cards in there. We would describe it that way. You could say there's 5 cards. You could distinguish between them and say that there's 4 moons and 1 star if you want as well. We just talk about the group. The sample space is all the outcomes. And outcomes, we talk about each possibility, one at a time. That's how they're different. But they very much relate to each other. So that's the things that can happen. I can either get a blue moon or a yellow star. Now, it sounds like there's 2 possibilities, right? So, I have a 50-50 chance. I could draw blue or I could draw yellow. There's 2 possibilities. I'm going to draw one, 50-50. Not quite. It's not quite that simple, because if we look at this, when we talk about the probability of drawing a moon, remember that's number of favorable outcomes out of the number of possible outcomes. And you gotta be careful here, right? There's not only 2 cards in here. If we say 2, that makes it seem like they're equally likely. Here there's actually 5 different outcomes. There's 5 cards in the bag. I'm going to draw one of them. So there's not 2 possible outcomes, there's actually 5. That's where our sample space comes into play. There's 5 cards. So how many are favorable? Well, in this case, 4 of the 5 cards are favorable. So I don't have a 50-50 chance of winning. I actually have a 4 out of 5 chance of winning. That's pretty good. 4 out of every 5 times I play, I would probably win this game. Y'all, that is how you express and talk about outcomes, sample spaces, and probability. If you had trouble with this, if any of these words didn't make sense or I went too fast or anything like that, please watch this video again. Most of the time, just seeing something for the second time, now that you've already seen it, it'll make it settle in really easily and you'll learn it very quickly. If you feel great about it, we'll finish up tomorrow and I'll see you in class.